Stench soup.
I knew this would be my last night in the city. It was time to move on, but I wasn't going anywhere. Not right away. There were things that needed to happen first, and then a final goodbye with Alexis, who had agreed to stay behind at my request. We met up outside of her apartment building late that evening and headed back towards mine. The street seemed more alive than ever as people strolled around or took advantage of the warmer weather by sitting out on their balconies drinking beer and smoking cigarettes. "Are you sure we shouldn't just leave? We don't need an extra set of clothes for each other," she said. "You know, there's no point now." I shook my head and smiled slightly before taking her hand in mine. Not yet. It was dark when we arrived home, and I told myself it didn't matter. After all, it wouldn't take long for me to make a quick change into something else if necessary. She turned off the lights inside so we could have some privacy while getting ready. She went into her room while I started undressing in front of her couch. It felt strange walking through her place naked. "Alex?" I called. When she failed to answer, I entered the bedroom and found her lying on top of her bed wearing nothing but her underwear. Her eyes grew wide as soon as they made contact with mine, and she began trembling violently. Oh God! Her hands were shaking too, reaching inside her mouth. I knelt down beside the mattress and grabbed her wrist gently. My own heart was racing faster than anything else in my body as I held her slender arm and tried not to think about what might happen next. "What's wrong?" She started stretching her face apart with both hands, letting her tongue flop out between them like a piece of meat hanging from its side. "What are you doing?" I shouted. The sound she was making sent shivers throughout my spine. I took a deep breath and closed my eyes, hoping that this would end well even though I couldn't see how it could go any other way at the moment. Something started growing out of her mouth. At first glance it looked like two little fleshy tentacles reaching out towards me on either side of her face, but then one sprouted another pair directly behind those which continued to grow longer, until finally coming to an abrupt halt just above where her neck met her shoulders. I let go of Alexis' wrist, then moved away from the bed quickly before turning to run into the bathroom, only to stop when something caught hold of my leg and stopped me in my tracks. When I glanced back over my shoulder, I saw that she had turned into some sort of monster, half woman and half octopus, and was staring back at me with a hungry look in her eyes. "Oh I whispered under my breath as she pulled herself up onto all eights, crawling after me while leaving thick strands of slimy mucus all across the floor. I ran towards the door as fast as I could without looking down or stumbling. Once there, I didn't bother closing it. Instead, I made a beeline for the stairs and took them 3 at a time until I reached outside. The cool night air felt nice on my naked skin and brought with it relief to find myself free of whatever danger lurked inside. A small crowd began gathering from out of nowhere, watching me from a distance. "Help!" I shouted to anyone who was listening. "Someone help!" But no one did. There were people around, but they were far enough away that they weren't going to get anywhere near me unless they wanted to risk being bitten by a human-octopus hybrid. I started running again, not really knowing what direction to take but having an idea of where the city ended. When I came upon an alleyway between 2 buildings, I hid behind it so the creature wouldn't spot me if she chose to follow me out here. Alexis's slithering form soon appeared between the walls right beside me. Her long green body hung off the ground and her limbs stretched out on either side like tentacles ready to wrap themselves around me and drag me back into her home. "No," I said loudly when her tentacles suddenly shot out and wrapped themselves around my waist, lifting me into the air like I was nothing more than a toy in a playroom. Her mouth opened wide, revealing row after row of jagged, sharp teeth. "Wait! Please, wait!" She held me up high in the air with ease as I continued begging for mercy that she wasn't going to give. I could feel the hard edge of her razor-sharp jaw against the soft flesh of my stomach before it pierced through and tore a chunk of skin clean off my chest. "No! Oh!" I screamed at the top of my lungs before she threw me over her head and onto the dirty street below. "You should have left hours ago," she whispered down from above, her voice almost sounding tender now, almost gentle. "Why do you make things so difficult?" I got up and started running again, straight towards the people who had gathered outside. "Help! I cried out loud once more. "Somebody please help." I ran right into the crowd of people who didn't even bother moving out of the way when they heard me coming their way. One man turned around, then another. They saw Alexis's tentacles reach around behind them like snakes waiting to strike. I stumbled backwards, falling over someone's feet just to get away from her as quickly as possible. I couldn't tell which direction to go without being able to see my surroundings or having any clue where to run next because everywhere was blocked off by this thing that was crawling after us. And then she spoke. "People of the city, listen well." She let out a long, raspy sound that resembled a foghorn calling to the ocean. Then she began whispering something too low for me to hear properly, but the words still managed to find their way inside me and shake me up enough to know what I needed to do. "This is your chance for redemption. All it will take are some simple actions to be taken in order to save your world from certain destruction. Please remember that there will not be a second opportunity, no matter how hard it may seem." There were hundreds of faces surrounding me in every direction. Old men, young girls, boys with hair hanging past their shoulders, everyone looking at each other with confusion. Alexis continued speaking as though nothing was wrong at all, as if she was talking to everyone as one entity rather than as individuals. "Take action and do the right thing. Do as I say and everything will come together as planned." Her eyes moved around slowly until they came to rest on mine. She gave me the same look she did back when I first arrived here in the city years ago, and said I wasn't ready yet. "The man standing there," she pointed her tentacle towards me and waited for everyone's attention before continuing her speech. "The man who stands between you and salvation, he must die. Kill him and you shall become free again." Everyone stared at me blankly while a few of them seemed confused by this new development. The more time passed, however, the more terrified they became of my presence, eventually surrounding me like a pack of wolves waiting to pounce on an injured animal. It was only a matter of seconds now before someone would make that happen. "Do it," someone shouted from behind my back. "Kill that bastard," another person added as people started to shove themselves closer and closer to me. They formed a wall of bodies that I had nowhere to run through in order to get away from their hungry looks and threatening glares. I closed my eyes and began praying to God for his help, but there was no answer forthcoming.